Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. Um, this week's lecture is going to be about the value of art, and I'm going to start off today with talking about the art market. So, there's a lot of money that's involved in the art market, and I do have to say it is very unregulated. Um, the sale between individuals is something that's done a lot. Um, it's there have been tales of using art as a way of embezzling money, driving various nefarious deals and things like that because the government isn't, as involved. And so it's a very interesting topic. It can be really dry, and you can get way heavy into kind of random details, but it's actually very, very interesting. So, what I wanted to talk about first was um, why it has gotten so important recently. And one of the main reasons is because the very rich have gotten richer ever since the recession of 2008. The one percenters, as you probably have heard of them by now, have gotten more and more wealthy. So they have all the houses they need, all the cars they need. So now owning art and putting money into art is a way of showing off your wealth. So it's a status symbol, and this is global. This is global. Um, so, with the rise of the mega rich, they are now buying art, and it's good for the artist, some of them. But usually a lot of us normal people are really kind of out of it. So there's that, and there's also investing because, and I think I've mentioned this before at the beginning of the semester, artwork does not depreciate in value. It's always going to increase no matter if you buy someone unknown or whatever little amount you can invest in it, it's always going to go up. It may not double or triple as some people hope, but it's definitely going to go up. So as far as businesses and in individual, they are now investing in art, um, and many times turning a very high profit. So the art market is off the charts. We're talking it's a billion, almost $1 trillion industry. Um, I don't have the numbers for 2019 yet, but they should be out like this month or later next month. So what demands the high prices? There are these four different things that can come into play. The first is hype, right? You guys have heard this before. Any publicity is good publicity. This is true for artists and their artwork. Have they been in the news? Has something happened? If it's a living artist, did they just die? I know this is kind of a twisted thing, but if they did, it means that if you own a piece, the value automatically goes up because now they're not going to be making any new pieces. Um, was another piece sold to someone famous, or was it in, something or other? Was it involved in a movie? I mean, it can be any kind of hype, can increase the value of if you already own that artist, right? So that's a big, big part of it. The second thing is characteristics of the piece. So is it signed by the artist? Nowadays, everybody signs everything. This has not always been true. There's a lot of artists that don't sign their pieces, or they don't sign the front. So if, that is a big part of it. Provenance, this is another thing. The provenance is really the history of the piece. Can from the minute it was completed and whoever commissioned the piece or whoever first bought it, what has happened to it throughout its history? Um, who owned it? When did they sell it? What shows has it been in? The provenance is basically the history of the artwork. Obviously, older, masterpieces have a longer provenance than some of the new pieces, but also that adds to the characteristic of the piece. Also, the subject matter. This can come into both the characteristic and the historical significance, meaning what's the rarity of the subject matter? Is this a topic or a subject that they painted a lot? Or was this the first time somebody painted this? Or, where was it within their career? Things like that. Other strange things, oil paintings always are more valued than any other type of artwork, period. I think it's just never been in doubt that oil paintings are quote unquote fine art. And so if it is an oil painting versus a watercolor or any other kind of painting or even a sculpture, it's going to be worth more. Historical significance, again, like I said, it could be about the subject matter within the artist's life, but also like what movement were they in, what, impact did they have on the movement, what time in the artist's life was this made, different kind of historical kind of importance, both in the history of the artist's life, but within art history as well. Okay. And again, that can also kind of lead back into provenance. So the characteristics of the piece and the historical significance can kind of overlap, and that's fine. The last thing is when the art market is happening, when the sale of a piece is happening, where is it being sold? Most often, it's sold at auction. And so the prestige of the auction house is very important. The more prestigious, the higher money will be brought. So let's just say you have a famous piece that your family owns and you inherit it. If you want to sell it to get the money out of it, you don't go to a local auction house here in Wilmington. You would do research on the artist, and then try to get into a Sotheby's or a what's the other one? A Christie's auction house. Now, within the auction house, what's important is what city it's selling from, the time of the sale, and then the order in which the lot is being sold. So the cheaper artwork gets sold earlier on, and the most expensive, the one everyone's dying to see, if they can afford or whatever it goes for, is going to be the last object sold. So here's a picture of Sotheby's. You see people in the foreground. Those could be galleries, but they can also be representatives of individuals. And then on the phones are people from all over the world that are also bidding. So it's just like an auction, like you would see at a county fair, but now they're auctioning off art houses. Now, the thing about avoiding an auction house, so if you go from individual to individual, is you don't have to pay as much commission, but still you have to have someone that's brokering the deal for you. So a really great business to get into is art sales, but you have to know all the right people in order to get into that, but you can make a lot of money doing that. Okay, so the most expensive painting is this painting. It was a lost Da Vinci painting. It's called Salvator Mundi. This is Jesus Christ giving the benediction, the Son, the Father, and the Holy Ghost. You can see with his right hand, and he's holding a glass orb in his left hand. There's a lot of kind of controversy about this piece, and I'll talk about this later on, but this sold in a matter of minutes for $450 million. Now, that's a lot of money. That's a huge amount of money. And the other Da Vinci that is so famous, of course, is the Mona Lisa. Now, people have guesstimated since this painting, which was a lost Da Vinci, and there's even some speculation that it could not be real. Again, I will get to that coming up. But so if this one, which has kind of a shady history, is worth $450 million, just imagine the Mona Lisa is basically priceless. If you do the provenance on the Mona Lisa, Napoleon Bonaparte had it in his house for a time period. It has been, it was stolen. There's been a lot of stuff that goes around that adds to the hype of the Mona Lisa. So really, it's very difficult to sell because the Louvre obviously would never sell it, but it's very valuable. So it's brought up that kind of conversation for sure. So this is currently the most expensive painting in the world. After the Salvator Mundi comes de Kooning's painting, and we're not really sure about the price here because, um, well, we'll talk about it anyway. It was a private sale between David Geffen and Kenneth Griffin. And in 2015, it was sold for $300 million. So in 2015, this was the most expensive painting ever paid. Now, if you look at the technique or the painting itself, it's actually an abstract expressionist painting. So de Kooning is a contemporary of Jackson Pollock's. The brushstrokes are really bold and dynamic, and there looks like there's a lot of energy to it. And de Kooning, who's pictured here, he was really kind of a painter's painter. He was very intellectual. He was someone that a lot of people looked up to. He was very giving with his time and his opinions with other artists. He was not one who kind of, kept all his secrets to himself. He was a player in the art world from the beginning. He was very successful during his life, um, and many painters admired him. Yeah, so this one, it was sold in 2015. The last time I looked, which, could be different, this is now worth 317 million. So in 5 years, it's gone up, about $20 million. Again, it will never go down, ever. Paul Cézanne, this one sold for $250 million, and this was bought by the state of Qatar. Um, Again, we believe that the price went up. It says the buyer was unknown, but it's been understood now that Qatar was building their new gallery, new museum, their country museum, and they wanted some really pivotal pieces. So this was one of the ones they bought. Now, Paul Cézanne was a French painter. He is very pivotal, influenced a lot of people, mainly Picasso and Braque, who invented the Cubist style. And so this has been a very famous painting. And if you look at it closely, if you look at all the colors that go into these garments, if you look at their jackets, and one is not just merely dark gray and the other one kind of tan, we have all different kinds of colors in there. So he was, really good with using his colors and expressing a lifelike quality to the pieces. Paul Gauguin, this was Van Gogh's friend who, sorry, excuse me, had left Europe to go to Polynesia because he was upset by the Industrial Revolution. He didn't like the advances the world were taking, and he really wanted to go back to simple kind of, I hate this word, but more primitive type of living. And this one was bought in concert with the other painting, again by the state of Qatar. They're estimating about 210 million. They know the state of Qatar spent about 500 million. Um, so, they're kind of dividing the prices because it wasn't really, the information was not shared. Um, and if you look at this Gauguin, he really liked big swaths of color, big planes. If you think about what he is, a post-impressionist, um, where, similar to Van Gogh, very interested in color, but instead of these short bursts of brushstrokes like Van Gogh, he's doing big kind of pockets of color. But look at the front woman's foot that's bent. It's kind of looks broken almost. It's very strange. That kind of strangeness can add to the quality and the price of a piece. Here we go with Jackson Pollock. This one sold for 202 million. Again, in a private sale. Um, the David Geffen, I'm thinking he's the movie producer. I could be wrong. And Kenneth Griffin is a money management person. Sorry, I'm having to pause every once in a while to take a drink or to cough. My allergies are acting crazy. So again, we talked about why Jackson Pollock was so famous. Remember he was this is a purely American movement, um, and it stands for he and his work really stand for a time when the art world was shifting its location, its kind of art centerness from Europe, from Paris or London, really actually more Paris to New York City. And then if you see in this magazine clip, which I've shown you before, the actual painting is in this magazine. So again, that's hype, right? Here is the original piece, and then it's right here. So again, the fact that it was in Life magazine, it adds to its importance, its hype to it. My favorite, Mark Rothko. This one sold for 186 million. We think it's upwards towards 200 million now. This piece was, if you notice the private sale of the names here, these are going to be important later on when I talk about a certain painting and a kind of a scandal that goes on here. Now, I like to play that if I was, a quadrillionaire, I would buy a Rothko. I'm not sure that I would spend 100, 200 million on one, but I would find one I really liked, and definitely it would be an investment / just an honor to have one. But I, of course, can buy a poster for, $30 and it's just as good. Pablo Picasso's piece here was sold for 160 million. Now, if you think about this, Picasso, genius, master, this is quite less than the $450 million Da Vinci, right? Very different artists, but pretty amazing. The thing is, Da Vinci didn't make as many paintings. Picasso made a ton. So if you own a few Picassos, and let's say next week someone sells a Picasso and it goes up to 300 million, that's going to make your Picasso become more valuable. Okay, this is another one. This is 155 million. I mean, we've looked at this picture before. This is really kind of has a funny story to it, because Steve Wynn, an American hotelier, he owns a bunch of the Wynn Hotel, and he has a very famous hotel in Las Vegas. He was arranging for a private sale. I think it was going to be about 135 million they had agreed upon. But there's something wrong with Steve Wynn's eyesight, and he was showing it off, and he actually punctured the painting either with his hand or his elbow one time when he was showing it off. And so then obviously the sale was canceled because the person didn't want to buy this painting with a hole in it. He had it cost him a few $100,000 to get it repaired, but then he was able to sell it for $20 more million than he originally asked for, because now that story is part of the piece, right? Now that story and the rip and all of that is part of the provenance. It was very well known throughout the art world that this happened, right? So that just adds to it, adds to the story. And Steve Wynn in Republican money circles is very well known. He's part of the Republican Party, like, financier. He has raised money. He's friends with Trump, all of that stuff. He's kind of a big player in politics as well. So, he's well known, not just for putting his hand through this or owning hotels. He's well known for other reasons. So all of that has impact on the value of the art. It's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy world. Francis Bacon, this one sold for 142 million. This Francis Bacon is if you look at this work, it's very different. It's a portrait basically it's a triptych, meaning the three pieces are always going to be seen as one, right? And this person is sitting on a chair being portrayed, but there's something kind of weird going on in the background. He's sitting in some kind of invisible cube. The person is fairly distorted, almost looks like he's morphing into some kind of animal. Francis Bacon was not well known in the world. He's not just something everybody knows. He's not someone who everybody knows. He makes he made very few paintings, and the bidding for this started at $80 million, which shocked people. So that means the person who owned the painting didn't want less than $80 million. Okay, you kind of, if you have a piece and you're saying, okay, I want to sell this, you can set the bidding price. It's the same thing as, selling a pair of shoes or something on eBay. You will take X amount, no less. If you don't sell them, then, you could try again, or maybe you'll, change it if it doesn't sell. Well, this went to 140 plus million dollars. And everyone was flabbergasted because they thought, okay, yeah, it might go up to 100 million, but nobody expected it to go that high. So now this person who then owns it, if they want to turn around and sell it, they won't sell it for less than 150 million, probably. And again, the price always goes up. It's just crazy. It's really, really crazy. Here's another de Kooning. His abstract expressionism became a little bit more recognizable. It became less abstract because here you can see a woman. This one sold for 156 million. Another Jackson Pollock for 140. Gustav Klimt's. I wonder if any of you have seen that movie. It is such a good movie. It's The Woman in Gold. Please, please watch it. And now it's worth 135 million. Our beloved Van Gogh, his is the highest one that has sold for him was in 1990, and it sold for 82.5 million. So 1990, were you guys born then? I was graduating high school. It is now worth 160 million. Okay, so it's doubled in price in the 30 years since these people have owned it. So $82 million is a lot of money, but it's doubled. Okay, so that's basically what people are guesstimating it's worth. But let's just think about this. It's really the value of art is really what someone will pay for it. So they're guesstimating it's worth 158, but what if someone's willing to pay 200 million for it? Then that's what it's worth. So we're dealing with crazy, crazy numbers. Crazy numbers. Here's the first and only painting Van Gogh sold while he was alive in 1890 for 400 francs, which I think was approximately about $1,000 in today's money. Beautiful colors and lots of people. He didn't paint a lot of people, so I wonder what the value is now. Okay, so your homework is to go and research a piece of art that you like and find out about why it's so valuable. You'll see the instructions on the handout. But I want to keep going because there is probably going to be another assignment through here, okay? So, but the first assignment is to research why a specific piece that you like is so expensive. And I want to kind of keep going. Here is Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's pictured here. He's an American artist, street artist. In May of 2017, so fairly recently, this large square piece, sold to a Japanese investor, art collector, billionaire for $110 million. Why is this important? It's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, Basquiat is Black. Basquiat is American. Basquiat is a modern artist, even you would say contemporary. Unfortunately, he passed away at that crazy 27 years old. The other thing is that he was a street artist, a graffiti artist. So the fact that an American black street artist's work is now in the millions, this is huge. This is really, really huge. I was thrilled that this happened. It's kind of like, if you think Basquiat is as great as I think he is, I think the reason I like him so much is that I think he was a man of his time, right? He was doing something very fresh and new and street, and it has edge to it. And he created his own language, and it was something the art world wasn't really sure that he should be in the art world, right? We got to think about this art world. These people who sell and know art, they're like old white guys, right? Are they going to look at this piece and say, oh, yeah, he's as important as Picasso? They're going to be a little bit more hesitant than that. But I feel like he is as important as Picasso. So now that someone has paid this much, if you own a Basquiat and you maybe invested a couple $100,000 in some of his paintings, your investment just like tripled or quadrupled. Like now he can get prices that you never thought before. Um, anyway, I think that's a huge kind of awesome thing. Um, you know, Basquiat was not, he was very smart. He left home young, but he was very intelligent, and his work is so important now. But a lot of people don't kind of realize that, or didn't want to realize that. Now I think he's a contender. The fact that it fetched so much money, you can't deny it. The art world cannot kind of overlook him anymore. Okay, so other kind of crazy things have happened recently. This piece, this little mylar balloon like sculpture called Silver Rabbit, was made by Jeff Koons. And this is about 9 inches tall, somewhere like maybe under a foot tall. It's like tabletop. It sold for $91 million. Um, Jeff Koons is not one of my favorites, so like it pisses me off a little bit as an artist, because he's the type of artist, he's a um postmodern artist that doesn't make any of his own stuff. So, and he copies other things, so, and that's very kind of postmodern, to challenge these ideas of originality and stuff. But $91 million for this, it just makes me jealous, I guess. But this is the most expensive sale of a living artist's work. So if you had millions and quadrillions, would you buy this? You know, um, it's amazing, amazing. Now, a lot of you might be thinking like, who gets this money? It depends on who owns the piece. So if Jeff Koons owned this piece and someone bought it for 91 million, then he would get that. But let's say Jeff sold it or gave it to somebody else, and then they sell it. Whoever is the current owner of the piece gets the money. Once the artist sells the work for however much they're selling it, they don't keep getting money from it. They only get the money from that original sale. This happened also this year, I think, or I'm sorry, last year. The artist is Kerry James Marshall, and Puff Daddy, or whatever his name is now, P. Diddy, bought this for 21 million. Not record-breaking prices. However, now Kerry James Marshall's name is, exposed to a whole new group of people. And if you had another piece by this artist, because someone famous, someone who, you could argue is a trendsetter that people kind of are paying attention to, what he spends his money on or whatnot, that's the hype That's the hype. So this is good in some cases. It's giving an unknown artist more recognizable customers and things like that. This might encourage other people that have money, but maybe not the hundreds of millions to invest in somebody, right? They can be like, oh yeah, Puff Daddy has one. Well, I'm going to get one. Um, you don't have to spend as much, but it's kind of an entry level collector amount. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a $21 million piece, but we got to keep it relative, right? So that's huge. That happened last year. So if you're an artist and you can get someone famous to buy your piece, that's huge. Um, Now, Georgia O'Keeffe. Now, the sad thing, of course, is that there aren't a lot of women artists that get the prices that dead male artists get. And I even venture to say before 2017, even white men. I mean, Basquiat now has broken that um, benchmark, but still, women artists do not, their work does not fetch the prices that men artists fetch. This is 2014, one of the most expensive female artists painting. It sold for 44.4 million, which is a lot of money, but comparable to other male artists, we're not in the same ballpark. And everybody knows who Georgia O'Keeffe is. Everybody. Women just get screwed kind of all around, people. Okay, we'll move on. I'll get off my soapbox for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about art theft. Okay, the FBI has a file of all stolen artwork that happens in America or that's owned by Americans. There is an Interpol website as well that has all the European, basically worldwide um, art thefts there. There's a lot of, obviously, we've talked about how much money is involved. And now, because of that, people are stealing it, right? I mean, it's just bound to happen. Um, and so we're going to talk about some of these oddities that happen. In August of 21st, 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen off the wall. Now, in 1911, they did not have security. Look, you're looking at a picture of where the Mona Lisa hung in between two other paintings. A man who worked at the Louvre took it off the wall and put it underneath his coat jacket and walked out of the Louvre. He was working at the museum. People didn't recognize it was gone for 2 days. Um, then it was like a worldwide, news. Who stole the Mona Lisa? Everybody, pretty much knew who Da Vinci was at that point. And the fact that a small painting had stolen was huge news, and especially in France, um, the news was very widespread. But it was one of those events that everybody kind of knew about. Here's the young man. This is his police portrait, actually, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he was an Italian, and he actually felt that the Mona Lisa belonged in Italy. But through here, I talked earlier about the Mona Lisa's provenance, and remember, it was a commissioned piece, but he never gave it to the person um, that commissioned the piece, because he took it with him when he moved. Right when he was about done with this piece, or about the time it was commissioned, maybe a little bit later, he moved from Italy to Paris. And then he died a couple years later. So we know that the painting was with him when it died. And it went into, at the time, I think he was working for the royal family in Paris, in France, and it went into their collection. So we know that the royals had it, and it was given to a couple different royals throughout, several years, several hundred years. They followed it, and then at some point Bonaparte had it and showed it, and then whatever. But this young man, um, thought it should go back to Italy and that it should not be hanging in a French gallery. Um, he just felt like he was going to return it to Italy. So, but once he sold it, and it was such, huge news all over the world, he couldn't really get rid of it. So he kept it in a trunk inside of his closet for a couple of years. And then he tried to sell it, and it was then he tried to sell it to an Italian um, art dealer. But the art dealer knew, like everybody knew it was missing. And so instead of being a bad guy, the art dealer notified the police and said, "Hey, this guy's trying to sell me the Mona Lisa." And so, whatever happened, and he was captured. And he admitted to it. He was like, "Yeah, I was trying to return it to Italy." But once it was returned to the Louvre, it now had this importance attached to it. It was found, it was recovered. My goodness, a masterpiece. And so that now it didn't stay in the same place because now everyone wanted to come and see the recovered painting. The hype led to the Mona Lisa becoming more important in the world. Okay, so it was thanks to him. Some could say that it was, it started to gain more and more importance. Now it also has been attacked. The painting has been attacked several times. Um, One lady was mad. She was in a wheelchair and she was angry at the Louvre's handicap situation. And so she threw a coffee mug she bought at the gift shop at the painting, and it actually chipped the painting. So now if you go to the Louvre, if you happen to go overseas and want to see it, this is how you see it. It is behind bulletproof glass, and you cannot get within 6 feet of it. You have to stand behind the painting because so much has happened to it and it's so valuable. Really, it's priceless. Um, so yeah, it's a whole different, kind of crazy world. Um, During World War II, we talked about um, Adolf Hitler being a let's see, an artist who was not accepted by the art world. Remember, he was not allowed into art school, and they said there wasn't a lot of depth to him. During his reign, he did, in addition to killing millions of Jewish people, he stole from them. And he kept art that he felt was good, that followed his kind of aesthetics, what he thought was good art. And he literally damaged, destroyed books and artwork that was avant-garde, was new, was kind of doing, ideas or working with themes and subject matters that he didn't approve of, right? So there was a lot of destruction. And um, here you can see, he's commandeering and storing the work that he does like. He would take over somebody's residence or a museum or a castle or something and then fill it with stuff. The movie Monuments Men, here's another one, just art stacked up. So luckily he didn't destroy um, too much of it, but quite a bit too. And there's some that's still missing. But that movie Monuments Men is a real story about a real group of military people that were their job was to locate the artwork that Hitler and his men had stolen and try to recover it and save it, basically. Again, here's that woman in gold um, theme, and it was kind of the same thing. Hitler had, or his men had taken this painting from a family, and the heir of the family that originally owned it was later recovered, and the Austrian government put it on display in their country's museum. And the lady below, who that's pictured with it, she was the niece of the woman who owned the painting. And so the story is about her trying to get it back, for her to say, no, this is my family's painting, and it's rightfully mine. Is not owned by the Austrian government. It's a really beautiful, good, very interesting story. Um, but because of these two things, a lot has kind of changed. This man, um, at the top here, was busted. He was like 80 years old, and he was traveling between Vienna and Geneva, Switzerland, and Austria. And he was acting really weird on a train, and some police people, he was very suspicious. Some policemen kind of stopped him and asked him questions like, what is your business? What are you doing? And they kind of, they frisked him or whatever. And he had like probably $30,000 in cash on him. And they were like, what are you doing with all this cash? Like, what? He's like, well, I sold something. And they're like, well, what did you sell? And they started questioning him, and they took his name and his information, and they actually started to investigate him for tax fraud because it was cash. He wasn't claiming this, um, and they were suspicious. It turns out that his father had worked for Hitler, and he was an art expert. So Hitler had instructed him on which paintings he wanted to keep. And so this man's father, it turns out, had actually stolen a bunch of art that would have been destroyed by Hitler. Now, some of it, we're not sure if all of it would have been destroyed. Some of it would have been stuff he approved of, but most likely, if you're looking at this picture, these are not traditional kinds of paintings. They all look very kind of experimental, kind of new modern pieces, pushing the boundaries. And Hitler wouldn't have liked that. He would have liked classic, traditional kind of subject matter. So this artist's father, you could say, in a way was saving art, but he was stealing from Hitler, and his son was now selling it underground kind of way, just to live off the profits. So it was Switzerland who had discovered this. That in this guy's house, I think he owned a property, his sister owned a property, maybe another property, and it was chock-a-block full of art that had been stolen from Jewish families during World War II. And this dude was selling them. So once this was discovered, he was very old when he was kind of busted, and he has since passed away, and no charges have been filed because I think his sister is very old too. She might have even passed now as well. But what the Swiss government did, because of what happened with the Woman in Gold painting, the Gustav Klimt painting, is they have categorized them, and they are trying to give them back to the original owners. So they're trying to figure out who owned the piece. So they're going back through the provenance and any kind of information that this man may have had or his father may have had in order to return it to the rightful family. The other thing is, if there's no family that survived or that they cannot locate, they're giving them the paintings to the country that the person lived in, with an asterisk that says, if anybody from the family comes forward, that this painting will immediately go to that family. All right. So they're trying to do the right thing now, by everybody that's involved, by the families that may have been killed by the Nazis, by the countries, and all of that stuff. And this little man who was, currently profiting off of World War II, he should have spent his last days in jail, but he was forgiven. But crazy stuff is always going on in the art world. And again, because it's not very, regulated, governments kind of don't know what to do with it. It's all kind of very new ground. In 1946, 3 Georgia O'Keeffe paintings were stolen. In the 1980s, late 70s or 80s, they were recovered while Georgia was still alive, when a man was trying to sell them. His family had passed. He was the executor of the state. He had no idea that they were stolen, and he tried to sell them through an estate sale. And Georgia O'Keeffe got wind of this. She immediately called the police. The sale was halted and she got the 3 paintings back. The man who was trying to sell them did not get charged because he just didn't know. But then he's kind of thinking about, how the hell did my family get these paintings? Once they're stolen, what do you do with them? You live with them in secret. You can't tell anybody. You're going to get busted. I mean, it's really kind of weird. And the only people you can sell it to are other criminals. But then those people can't show it to anybody, because even like, look at you, if you had knew something was stolen, or something I've shown you today, and let's say you go to somebody's house and you see it, they're going to get busted. So they can't show the work to anybody. Okay, we're going to watch this video. This is a really good one. This is American art theft of the Gardner Museum in Boston. It is still a mystery. They have not recovered any of the work as of yet.
It is a beautiful and priceless collection. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art housed inside these walls.
Whoops. Ooh.
It is a beautiful and priceless collection. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art housed inside these walls. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Visitors from all over the world come to see these masterpieces, but that's not all they're looking at. They are also looking at a crime scene. In fact, a crime scene from the biggest art heist in history, still unsolved. And this is all that's left.
Come in, clock in, there would be 2 guards.
Rick Abbott was one of the night watchmen on duty the night of the crime.
Cops rang the doorbell. They said, "Boston police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises." So I buzzed them in. The cop that was dealing with me turned to me and said, "Don't I know you? Don't I recognize you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?"
He steps away from the security desk and away from the panic button. His only way to contact the outside world. His only way to prevent what was about to happen. In a matter of minutes, the 2 thieves had both night watchmen completely under their control.
He finished cuffing me and he cuffed my partner and very dramatically said, "Gentlemen, this is a robbery."
The thieves lead Rick and his partner down to the basement to different areas. It all happened so fast, he never had a chance to hit the one panic button by the guard desk. He knew no one was coming to help. Did the thieves know that as well? It appears they did, since they were in no rush to get out.
Path is interesting. They took the guards after they handcuffed them and taped them and brought them into the basement. About 24 minutes elapsed, though, before we see them again.
Motion detectors placed throughout the building picked up their trail for nearly an hour and a half. But that didn't matter. Those motion detectors weren't connected to police outside. They only alert the guard sitting at the computer by the entrance. A computer that was now unmanned.
It's in this hallway where we see the first motion detectors go off, so that's how we know that it was 24 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about 1:48, and they're walking down this hallway together, and they enter the Dutch room.
Which is right there.
Exactly, and from the Dutch room they took 6 pieces, and that's where,
including the Rembrandt.
The 3 Rembrandts, the Vermeer, and the Flink, and the Chinese vessel.
The real work had begun for the thieves, but as they get ready to remove Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only seascape, a high-pitched alarm sounds. Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Stephen Kurkjian has investigated this case for the Boston Globe for decades. He says this alarm was designed to keep visitors from getting too close to the Rembrandt.
That seascape, even if you look at prints of it now, images of it now, you will see a vision, an etching of Rembrandt himself. Art experts, art specialists, common folk knew that, and they would come up and they would put their finger close to, point out the image of Rembrandt, and if they got too close, then the alarm would sound.
Like the motion detectors, this alarm was not connected to the outside world. But did the thieves know that as well? Because they didn't pack up and leave at that point. They continued on with their crime, and they took their time.
Same path backwards. Goes through the early Italian room, the Raphael room, all the while passing incredibly priceless art.
At 2:41 a.m., the door to the museum opens and closes. The thieves were gone.
Once they leave, they've never heard from again.
Randy joins us now. I mean, this is really one of the biggest mysteries in the history of the art world. They finally do have a lead on what happened?
That's what they're saying now. Investigators are saying that the big news today is that they've seen the artwork. They have confirmed sightings of the artwork. And this is a really big deal, as you said, because this art is worth at least $500 million. And for years, investigators have feared that, well, maybe whoever took it put it in a basement or an attic, maybe for safekeeping, and maybe that person died or got killed if they were a bad person, and it was never to be found. So this is a really big break.
I mean, I remember last year, investigators had said that there was a break. They'd identified the suspects. They didn't actually name them. What are they saying today?
They are naming them now. 3 suspects, 2 of which are dead. One is Carmelo Merlino. He died in prison. And what investigators are saying is that he talked with undercover FBI agents many, many years ago and told them that he had some of this artwork, including the Rembrandt that we just saw there, and he said that he was going to return it to the museum and ask for the reward. Well, that never happened. Another person they're naming now is Robert Gentile. He's actually alive in prison on another charge. He has always said that he had nothing to do with this. But Anderson, they did search his home years ago on drug charges, and they said that they found items that they believe relates him to the museum heist. Items like a police badge, clothing with a police insignia on it, handcuffs, scanners, two-way radios, things that might have been used. Because
Was
remember,
there a third name?
there was a third name. I don't have it right here
Okay.
with me, but that person is also
Is
dead
also
as
dead.
well.
Okay, so just turn that down. So the one thing I question, and I'm gonna offer this as an extra credit, is what has happened to the piece? If they know the pieces, if they know that who did this, why haven't they been recovered? You know, there was a huge reward. I think it was $5 million for the work. So extra credit, if you can find out what's going on with this, what's the latest information about the Gardner Museum heist, then I'll give you some extra credit points. Okay, so that'll be one thing. Monk's The Scream has been stolen a couple times. You remember there's 4 of these. And so some people might argue, well, there's so many of them, you know, that's why they're stolen so often. But it has been stolen quite a bit. And one of them was during a daytime heist. In fact, here you can see from the CCTVs the thieves. Now, there's a lot of speculation that goes into this heist as well. They believe that the theft of these 2 paintings was a distraction for the police for a bank robbery that was going on in another part of town. So these artwork, the car and the pieces were recovered, you know, later that afternoon. But since this was such a high profile thing, daring, daytime, right, that the police were all doing this while somebody else was robbing a bank. Could be true, you know, not so sure. We looked at this piece at the very beginning of the semester when we were talking about shapes and space and things like that. Barbara Hepworth is a British sculptor. This is a piece that I really enjoy. I think her work is very mod. It's very kind of simple but beautiful. And I like the look of it. I like to, it's very tactile, so I like to touch it, you know. Anyway, I'm a big fan of her work. So this has been in a park in England for, maybe 30, 40 years. and overnight it was stolen. It was cut down um, and sold for scrap metal because it was copper. And it was insured for 500,000 pounds, but it was worth 700,000 pounds in recycled copper. Okay, so devastated about that piece. This is a very interesting theft story. This couple that's in the photograph, and you can see the police sketches below, apparently stole this Willem de Kooning's painting, Woman Ochre, from the University of Arizona. The university was either given a de Kooning or it was donated or on display for some reason, and it was stolen. And this couple that's pictured next to it, they're both teachers who, they never had children, but they were both teachers. And then every summer they would go on these really great trips. And it was after their death when their nephew was again kind of figuring out their estate that this painting was discovered. So what happened was sometime in the 1970s, a security guard was opening up the part of the university that housed the painting. And you have to understand that the security was not as good back then, okay? Just in so many different ways. But so this couple was waiting. The security guard opens the door. The man kind of comes in and goes up these steps. Meanwhile, the woman is talking to the security guard, almost distracting him. Asking how he's doing, what's going on, this and that, kind of follows him around as he's opening up the building. And then the security guard has to do something in another room, so he leaves and then comes back a few minutes later, and both the woman and the man are gone and the painting is gone. So the security guard calls the police, he does these sketches. It's never seen again until recently, when the couple passes away, or the I'm not sure if they've died at the same time or one died before the other, I'm not really sure, but at some point their estate is being managed by their nephew. And he's going through their house, and they've got all kinds of stuff, from their travels, and he finds this painting behind their master bedroom door. And he has no idea. He's not an art connoisseur. He has no idea who Willem de Kooning is. We know from what I just talked about that Willem de Kooning's paintings are valued, 300 million, 200 million, very high priced value. But he thinks it's art. He's like, okay, I'm going to try to sell this, and he takes it to a place. The person immediately recognizes it as a de Kooning, and the nephew kind of catches on, and he's like, okay, I'm not going to sell it here. I'm going to take it somewhere else. Then he discovers that this is the missing piece. This was stolen in Arizona, and somehow his aunt and uncle were involved in the theft. And he had thought they were just this boring teacher couple, and it turns out they stole it. They just took it. It has now been returned to the University of Arizona and is on display, and of course, now under great security. But it's just crazy stuff that happens, just crazy. And they they didn't tell anybody. They just enjoyed it, themselves in their bedroom, hidden behind a door. Another thing that happens is art gets damaged. And some of this, this is why there is insurance to art. If you ever do, you or your family or anybody does invest in art, they have to have it insured, because you never know what could happen. For example, this Greek vase was destroyed in the 1860s, I want to say, by a drunk museum visitor who knocked it over and it shattered into pieces. This is Greek art. I mean, we're talking about, in the hundreds, and could have been, who knows when it could have been made, but it was, centuries and centuries and centuries old, right? Very old. They were able to put it back together. In fact, it's very difficult for me to see, any damage. But yeah, who goes to a museum while they're a little bit tipsy? I don't know. This man, Nick Flynn, was walking downstairs and he tripped. You can see the video. He tripped, and when he tripped, he fell into these 3 vases that are Chinese Ming Dynasty vases that were on display at the British Museum. So this shows him. He's on the floor. He's grabbing his head. He's tripped over his feet or his shoelaces or something. But he gets up and he leaves. He doesn't stick around. It was an accident, and he doesn't stick around. And so, it's kind of almost like, what? Who doesn't stick around? They showed this on the news. They were like, do you know this person? Please have him come forward. Yada, yada, yada. It was on the news for days. He's hiding in his house. Finally, somebody calls a local station and says, hey, I think I know that person. The police show up to this guy's door, and they're like, hey, did you happen to fall in? He's like, okay, yeah, now he's busted. But, nothing happens to him except for he gets charged with leaving the scene of a crime because it was an accident. He's not, he didn't do it on purpose, but he didn't stay and take care of it. They did manage to put the vases back together. It took a few months, but you can see the lady in the bottom right corner, she put it back together. Okay, so why are those pieces on the shelf unprotected? That's a very good question. I hope some of you are asking yourselves that. And the second thing, if this happened to you, would you go or would you stay and own up? Huh? Here's another moral question. If you hit somebody in your car and leave a little ding, do you leave a note? I hope you do. I hope you do. Here's a little video. This kid runs into a painting in Taiwan. There's no sound to this. He's obviously on a school trip. You can see other students. He's walking. Hand goes through the painting. Here's the painting right here. It was about it was worth about 100.5 million. It was 350 years old. It's not, it's kind of a traditional painting. But see here, the lady takes him someplace, and it was a complete accident. I'm not sure what he trips on. Looks like he can't walk and look in a different direction. And actually it did cost a lot to fix, but the museum, after they reviewed this, they said, please don't tease this boy. It was an accident. He didn't mean to do it. And they were able to get it fixed. Now, this hype adds to the price of the painting, I'm sure. Okay, the last part of this lecture is vandalism. Now, I've told you about the Mona Lisa being stolen and the attack of the person with a coffee cup who was very upset. For some reason, some very rational people will react to art. There's actually, there's a disease that has been associated with this. And there has been acid thrown on the Mona Lisa. Again, a rock was thrown at it and a coffee mug from the gift shop. And again, that's why it's behind now bulletproof glass. It's had too much damage. It's too valuable. And they don't want to risk anything else happening to the Mona Lisa. This very famous painting was attacked with a butcher knife by a Miss Mary Richards in 1914 in London. Basically, she was a suffrage member of the suffrage movement, or allowing the women to vote and equal rights. And she attacked this painting when another prominent British suffragette was jailed. Later, she admitted that she got mad because so many male patrons to the museum would stand in front of this painting and oogle. Is that a word? This nude subject. So she was pissed off. So she was trying to destroy beauty. She was put in jail for a few months for vandalism. and the painting has been restored. Laszlo Toth, he attacked the Pieta. You guys, we talked about the Pieta a lot. He attacked it with a hammer, yelling, "I am God, I am God, I am God," over and over. And this, you can see he's being tackled by patrons, other people that were in the, this is in the Vatican, in St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, which is in Rome. And you can see here, her arm has been detached, and he hit her face and the back of her head with a hammer. Again, you know, he had some kind of psychotic break. And there he is. And you can see the damage done to her. It has since been repaired. And if you look at the arm here, see how the hand is kind of standing out, and it had been knocked off. When the police came, because it's, you know, protected and stuff, the police came and they were gathering all the pieces that they could find, and many of Mary's fingers were missing. Some of the fingers. These people picked up the fingers and put them in their pockets and were trying to take Mary's fingers home. So that, yeah, they saved Mary, but they were also trying to steal from the Vatican. Oh, what were they going to do? Like put her fingers on display at home? I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy. So a lot of damage done, but the repairs, you know, they were able to do it almost seamlessly. So that's great. Here's another Michelangelo's David. If you recall, this is, you know, he's way up on a pedestal. He's probably, you know, his feet are probably 5 or maybe 6 feet in the air. Like I'm 5'4" and I could barely see his feet. So anywhere, you know, he was propped up very high. So this guy, Piero Cannata, attacked it with a hammer, and he didn't do very much damage, but the incident, you know, he got arrested and charged with vandalism. Sometimes they get charged with vandalism, and sometimes they get sent to a hospital for the insane. Piero actually turned into an art dealer later in his life. Kind of ironic. Hans Joachim Ballmann was since he's passed, the most prolific art vandal in the history of the world. This Paul Klee painting called Goldfish was the first one that he damaged. He had a really kind of strange history. He knew even at a very young age that there was, you know, he had a lot of mental issues. He checked himself in to therapy as a teenager, and struggled with loneliness. He was detached from his parents. He had, you know, confidence issues. He wasn't very socially aware and couldn't really talk to anybody. Very awkward throughout his life, young life, and he was depressed and things like that as well. He did meet and fall in love. He got married. So that changed a lot, and his happiness was a good time period. He didn't feel the need to be on any drugs, and he was not in any kind of therapy or anything for that time period. Unfortunately, his wife died when she was cleaning the windows, and she fell out of the second-story window, and that set him on a path of destruction. She was an art lover. She used to like to go to museums and look at art, and she would talk to him about art, and she found a lot of interest in that. And then at this point, he decides he needs to destroy all things beautiful. That's the only way he can find happiness again, the same happiness he had with his wife. So he starts going to museums. He collects a bunch of acid in bottles and cans and things like that, and then just starts throwing it on the paintings. You can see this lower painting that shows the acid. The top two, the Rembrandt and the Lucas Cranach have been repaired, but these were all also destroyed. The good thing about most of these paintings, here's another Rembrandt, is that usually when the artist was finished, they painted a veneer, a kind of clear coat over the top of the painting. And the acid only ate through that clear coat. So it never actually got to the paint. So these would be sent to the country's main museum that did restorations and things like that. And they would remove the veneer and then paint a new coat on it. But this Bowman guy, I mean, the galleries and museums all knew to look out for him, but he still managed to get around them. At this point, he's being caught. He is going to jail. He's going into hospitals. At one point, he's getting electroshock therapy. He even has a lobotomy. That was something they did in the 60s to try to change his behavior. The only thing the lobotomy did was lower his IQ points. It did not stop this primal need to destroy things that other people thought was beautiful. So, I mean, they really tried everything. And over his lifetime, let's say 30 years, 40 years, he's in and out of jail, in and out of hospitals. He never stops. He can't be stopped. This one, he doused with lighter fluid and tried to catch it on fire. And fortunately, they stopped that before it was able to happen. He ended up dying in a prison, I believe, in 2014 or 2012, something like that, of cancer. But if he was let out, he admitted that he would go right back and start destroying things. Luckily, he didn't do any permanent damage to anything, but the amount of money that he cost people, was really quite amazing. He was diagnosed with a disorder about destroying art. I can't think of the word, but it was a clinical case where the art was attacked. Other pieces have been vandalized. This guy writes "Kill all lies" on Picasso's Guernica because he was upset with what was happening in America with Nixon's Watergate and all that stuff. You guys liked the minimal stuff. Barnett Newman's this piece here was vandalized. It was cut, slashed. It cost, I think, $300,000 to fix this painting. And it was fixed. And then shortly after, this one was destroyed by Barnett Newman. This is Helen Frankenthaler's painting. She was a contemporary of Mark Rothko. She was a colorist. And a 12-year-old stuck a piece of gum to the surface of this painting as he was walking through a gallery or a museum. It cost about $60,000 worth of damage to have it removed. A little bit of graffiti on a Mark Rothko piece. And then this is an installation piece. This is not a real Prada store. This is on the side of a highway in Marfa, Texas, which is kind of an art community, kind of like Asheville or something like that. Lots of artists live there. And this was put up, and it's really kind of about consumerism and the price, of what people will pay for a name brand and things like that. So this is very kind of postmodern ideas. Okay, so this is current. This is something that's been done in the last 15 years, 10 years. And it has been damaged. It has been, graffiti has been on it, but it's also become a place where people go and they have their picture taken in front of it. This crazy Prada store in the middle of Marfa, Texas, which is in the middle of freaking nowhere. Okay. One vandal, though, took it a little bit too far, and he painted the whole thing and covered it in, do you guys know Tom's shoes, which is the exact opposite of what Prada means. A Tom's, for every pair of shoes you buy, they send a pair of shoes to someone in a third world country, right? So it's about giving back, and Prada is not about that. But this guy was busted and charged with vandalism, and he had to pay. He had to basically fix the thing, and he was charged with $1,000 fine. So, this, talk about your worst first date. This beautiful couple, the lawyer from Houston, the woman from Dallas, went on their first date. Then he apparently took her home for more drinks. She got totally drunk and refused to leave his house and hid from him when he tried to call Uber to take her home twice. And in the thing of trying to find her, she destroys 2 Andy Warhol paintings and a sculpture. So she completely freaks out, blacks out, whatever you want to say. And this is her mugshot, I think, that same night. He finally has to call the police and have her removed, and is now suing her for the damage of art. Talk about a crazy first date. You can just Google first date art damage, and you will find out more about this. It's just kind of crazy. Now, you guys may or may not have heard of Banksy. We're going to get into street art coming up, but he is a very famous street artist. He is also one that challenges the price of art. So he made this painting. It's a stencil of a little girl in a little heart balloon, right? And he knew that it was going to be auctioned. And if it was ever auctioned, he was going to destroy it. And so I just want to show you this video.
Art connoisseurs could only watch in horror as an expensive piece was shredded before their eyes. No sooner did the gavel come down to mark the sale of Banksy's Girl with Balloon for a record $1.4 million, did the picture start to slip out of its frame into shreds below. The anonymous artist claims to be behind the stunt. On Instagram, he posted a photo of his prank with the caption, "Going, going, gone." In a later post, he explained how he did it. And it seems this stunt was years in the making. He claims he built the shredder into the painting's frame in case it ever sold at auction.
400,000, 400,000, 600,000, last chance, and selling for $860.
Witnesses couldn't believe what they were seeing. We can only imagine what the buyer was thinking. The person's identity hasn't been revealed. Sotheby's claims it was shocked by the stunt. The auction house is also trying to figure out what this means for the value of the painting. Considering the artist, who is known for using his craft to pull pranks and make ideological points, some artists speculate the value of Girl with Balloon could actually soar. For InsideEdition.com, I'm Mara Montalbano.
Okay, so basically it sold for 800 and something thousand pounds, which is $1.4 million or whatever. This happened. It was very shocking. Banksy, a street artist, he made this. He obviously gave it or sold it to someone he didn't trust, because you don't build in a shredder that only works if it's going to go up for sale if you know that person's going to turn around and try to make a profit off of a gift or something like that. So yeah, it didn't actually work. It only shredded half of the painting. In fact, this video where it stopped right there, that's kind of where it stopped, somehow short-circuited or whatever. It actually ended up being a couple, this couple that bought the painting. It took about 3 days for the price to basically double. Again, because of what happened and the hype that went around it, it has doubled in the price. So now it's worth about $2.6-ish million. That may have gone up. since this happened a couple years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy thing. And this is how it's on display now, half of it hanging out of the very ornate kind of traditional frame, something very, it's spray painted with a stencil. You guys know what a stencil is? Yeah. Okay, so those are some crazy things that have happened in the artwork. There's always something going on, and it's it's kind of like I love it when these crazy things happen. It just gets me, allows me more time to talk about the absurd obsession and price and value on different things. But I want to go back to this Salvador Mundi painting. It actually sold for 400 million, and it was 50 million plus in various fees and commissions and things like that. So sometimes you'll hear about this being called 400 million. Sometimes they include that $450 million. And let's talk about the mystery behind this. So Da Vinci kept very good records, and he kept a lot of sketchbooks and things like that. So we know that he painted this painting. There's records of it. He has sketches of it, all of that stuff. But we don't know what happens to it. It is not one that we can follow the provenance like we can with some of his other work. It kind of is around and noted for a while, and then it disappears, and then it reappears. And when it reappears, it has had some work done. It's had some damage, and then someone who we don't really know how good they were tried to make some repairs but used the wrong paint. And so eventually it came up into, and here's, you can see the condition that it was in when it was found. Okay. This black and white photo was also a record of its existence. And you can see it's before any damage had done and nobody tried to do any restoration to it. Da Vinci often painted on wood instead of canvas. And so this wood was not a very good piece of wood. It actually, if you can see, it has some knots in it, and it was bowing. The Mona Lisa also has some wood issues as well. They're doing their best to kind of preserve that. So we have some questions about, would Da Vinci have picked a piece of wood that was known to not be perfect for a painting? You think this man is very smart and knows a lot, that kind of makes me wonder, but some x-rays have been done. The paint has been tested. Once they removed some of this overcoat that someone tried to repair, they knew that the paint was from the time period that the Mona Lisa was painting, and some other pieces. Another kind of questionable thing about the painting is that he didn't paint men very often, and he never painted people straight on with square shoulders like we're seeing here. Okay. If you look at these paintings, here's the Salvador Mundi, and mostly he painted women, and most of the time they're kind of turned, and we're looking at some kind of profile, picture. So that's kind of new, but he is portraying Jesus, so that might be the reason he treats it differently. Certainly, the person who discovered this, and when they started doing research, felt like for sure the hair, the style in which the hair was painting is exactly the style that Da Vinci would have used. And this is that restorer. So let me tell you the story of how this happened. Robert Simon found the painting up for auction from a very wealthy Louisiana family. Somehow this family had bought the painting at an auction. I believe it was in London in the 1940s, and I think they paid a couple $100s for it. And then they took it home to America, and it lived in their house in Louisiana. Then the family, dies, or they lose money, so they're kind of selling the stuff. And Robert Smithson is kind of going to a lot of these auctions looking for art and all over places, and he recognizes this, so he buys it. He buys it for $2,000. Okay. And then he decides, Robert Smithson hires Diane, I can't remember her name, but she's his art historian and a very well-known art restorer in New York. So he sends it to her and says, I don't know what I've got here, but I think it's something. I need you to uncover what's really going on, because you can see that it's been overpainted. So this lady, Diane, starts working on it, starts removing the paint that's on top, and she goes to Mr. Simon and says, you've got a Da Vinci. Oh, Diane Dwyer is her name. And he's like, what? She's like, I think this is Da Vinci. So he bought it for $2,000, hires her to research it. Then when she says that, he then sends it over to England to have it authenticated, and contacts a bunch of different experts on Da Vinci, kind of all over Europe. They all look at it. And I mean, he's not just taking Miss Dwyer's word for it. He's doing some research. And they all agreed that it's this missing Salvator Mundi by Da Vinci. So Robert Simon sells it for $75 million to Mr. Bouvier, a Swiss art dealer. So he made a $2,000 investment plus all the money to have it restored and authenticated, which was, probably a lot of money, a couple $100,000, let's just say. But then sold it for $75 million. It is, while it has been accepted to be the piece, there's still a lot of question. Are they sure? Are they sure it's him? Why is the wood in such bad condition? All of this other stuff. Okay. Then this Bouvier, the Swiss art dealer, sells that piece along with 37 other pieces to a Russian oligarch for $1 billion. And when we were looking at the price of art, that Rothko piece was amongst those pieces. So Dmitry Rolybolev, he owns a soccer team. I don't know if it's Real Madrid, but it's a soccer team, really big soccer team. Excuse me. And once some work has been done, the Russian oligarch ends up suing the Swiss art dealer and says, hey, you've gouged me on some prices, blah, 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 and so it's the Russian oligarch in the meantime. So he's suing the Swiss guy saying, hey, you overcharged me. Meanwhile, he puts the Salvator Mundi up for sale, and it sells for $450 million. And considering he bought 38 pieces for $1 billion, he's already made half of his money back on one sale. Right? So should he really be bitching? That's a whole nother thing. So let's watch this for a second. Oh, well, let me go on. So then the sale of the piece was secret. And it is immediately revealed that Prince Badir bin Abdallah bin Mohammed, bought the piece. But actually, he wasn't the owner. He bought it for his cousin, who is Mohammed bin Salam, who is MBS. You may know him from, he's the leader that a lot of people believe killed the Wall Street Journal reporter and hacked up his body. I don't know if you guys remember that. And that he was the real owner. He sent his cousin, this prince, in to buy the painting for him. It sold in 12 minutes for, again, that $400 million. And he said, because it brought so much money, people, reporters and journalists, they all try to figure out who did it. And it was said that they're building a new Louvre in Abu Dhabi, which is a beautiful city, and it was going to be the seminal piece for this new museum. And who wouldn't actually, it was on display in London for like 6 months, and people were coming from all over the world to see the new Da Vinci. So certainly people, art enthusiasts, would have traveled to Abu Dhabi to see this Salvator Mundi, this new found reclaimed piece. Okay, so now we know who owns it. Here's the thing. It has never been given to the Louvre. Nobody has seen the painting since it was up for auction. It has essentially disappeared. Okay? So it was sold. We know the royal Saudi Arabia's royal family and the crown prince bought it, but nobody's seen it. The people have been waiting for it to be on display, for the Louvre to announce it is here, please come see it. And on Twitter, they announced twice that the opening has been delayed. So where is this painting? And what's happened to it? That is the mystery. So this is just a little news report about it.
It's named Salvator Mundi, a painting by Leonardo da Vinci depicting Jesus Christ. Thought to be 500 years old, it's said to be one of the world's last long-lost Da Vinci originals.
Give me 1/4.
That's why when it was auctioned in 2017, the bidding was unlike anything ever seen before in the art world.
200 million. Are we all done? 300 million at $370 million. It's $400 million. Here's the bid. Sold.
Including the buyer's premium, Salvator Mundi sold for a record-breaking $450 million. That's more than 4 times what anybody in the art world predicted. The identity of the buyer, initially shrouded in secrecy, was eventually revealed to be a wealthy Saudi working on behalf of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who then gave the painting to the Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum as a gift. But the announced unveiling of the artwork was abruptly cancelled without explanation. Salvator Mundi has not been seen since, leading Pulitzer Prize-winning art critic Jerry Saltz to say it was all a fraud.
If you bought the most famous painting in the entire world by the most famous artist who ever lived at the highest price ever paid, why are you hiding it? Might the painting be a fake? You don't have the confidence to show the most famous new painting in the world? Something's fishy here.
But Oxford professor Martin Kemp, one of the world's renowned experts on Da Vinci, thinks the painting is authentic, but with every day it's kept hidden with no information, he worries.
It is somewhat disconcerting to find that it's not appearing. I presume the ownership is secure, but even that I wouldn't be entirely confident about.
Nobody who might know the status of the painting is talking. Requests for information to the museum, the Abu Dhabi Department of Culture and Tourism, and the Saudi Embassy in Washington were all not returned. One of the great mysteries of the art world, likely only to be solved when and if the world's most expensive painting reappears. Gabriel Ozondo, Al Jazeera, New York.
So, what has happened to the Salvator Mundi? What do you think? And why hasn't it been on display? Why would you pay $450 million to a Russian oligarch for a painting that is not real? Could there be something nefarious going on? Could it be some kind of money laundering, some kind of business deal? Or do you think he's just decided to keep the painting for himself? This is a second part to your homework assignment. So we have 3 parts here. We've got the first one where you're going to research a art piece of your choosing from the most expensive art in the world list on Wikipedia. Okay, and you're going to find out why it's so valuable, and that's on the handout. The extra credit is, oh, I've forgotten the extra credit. What is the extra credit? I can't remember now. And then the third part is, what do you think happened to the Salvator Mundi? Okay. So, oh, the Gardner Museum was the extra credit. I'm just remembering now. Okay. So, news update. You know, there's all these, you know, it was sold a couple years ago and then it's been delayed. The latest news is probably 8 months old now. And this Saudi Arabian crown prince has said that it's on, he has put it in his super yacht, which is called the Serene right here, and that it's on his boat. Nobody's seen it. We have not seen a picture of it, but that's what he has said. He says that it's on his super yacht. But I want you to do some research and I want you to kind of formulate your own opinion. What do you think has happened to this piece? What could possibly, now there's a bunch of, you know, crazy conspiracy theories going on. And it kind of, you know, I want you to do some research, do your own little research on what you think, and just write an opinion. It can be like a paragraph of why you think, you know, what you think has happened to it, where you think it is, and then why you think that. Okay. It can, and it's just an opinion. It doesn't have to be based on any evidence or anything like that, but it's just something interesting. Okay, so I know this was a long lecture. So I'm going to give you guys a week and a half on this. So by next Wednesday, which, let me look at my calendar really quick, is going to be April 8th, this worksheet is going to be due. Okay. And with the 2 parts, the most expensive art piece of your choosing, what's happened to the Salvator Mundi, the extra credit about what has happened to the Gardner heist and the artwork. Okay, guys, I hope you found this interesting. I'll talk to you soon.